speakers today who will be talking about the IoT, the Internet of Things, and whether it can inscribe itself or whether the IoT will be useful as a ledger in the future and how we see the future. So we have with us expert panelists who will share their opinions on that. But in the meantime, first I would like to say that we are recording this program and we have a Q&A session or chat in the bottom of the screen right there. So you can just write your questions as we go and I will interrupt and have a look. So please feel free to ask questions, tell us where you're from, just write down your country, or why you're listening to this. We'd love to hear from you. So IoT, what is it? It's the Internet of Things. Can we live without it? That's one of the questions that I'll be asking our panelists. But first, let me introduce them. So we have Arnaud Brely, and the poor guy is in Singapore, and it's very early for him or very late. So thank you for being here. So you are the co-founder of Arcadia. It's a fintech startup, and it develops real-world asset tokenization. And you'll tell us what that is all about and what solutions you've got. You're also leading the enterprise blockchain for SITA or SITA. And those are more like for logistics and as I can see, air cargo, supply chain, and that sort of thing. So that'll be very interesting, especially as we're talking as well now about the space in space. Can I put it that way?
Yeah.
Then we have Laurent Vieira Di Mello, who has 20 years experience in the management and business development of telecommunications. Also worked with SITA, if I'm not wrong, and also into the space technology that is coming up now. So I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute. And then the question would be as well as why is IoT so important to our civilization today? Does it involve climate? Does it, find solution for climate change or control, etc.? And then last but not least, of course, we've got Laurent Sauveur, whom we've met on a few occasions already here in Geneva, and you're the president of the Foundation for the Red Cross, or the International Red Cross Committee, and you're going to talk to us about NFTs and how they're useful and your experience in the past with all this new technology. So to come back to my questions, how do you think IoT is useful for us in the future? Why do we need it so much? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe Laurent. Laurent number one, shall I call you?
Yeah.
Yellow.
Yes. Sure. So you asked us to introduce ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, my background is in aerospace engineering plus an executive MBA. And I worked for SITA, but also in the energy business, aerospace, and startup coaching before joining Astrocast. And I'm now the COO of Astrocast. Astrocast is the satellite telecommunication company located in Lausanne. And basically our mission is to connect remote objects in the world, IoT object. About the IoT and why it's so important for businesses and for climate change and the world, I think the ability to remotely monitor or run operations has a lot of advantages for companies. It creates more data streams and analytical potential, meaning that companies can gain more insights about their business operations or how their customers use their products and services, for instance. So then you can imagine new models, new business models, using that data analytics to improve customer experience. You can also use IoT to improve your supply chain or your operations by by using predictive maintenance, for instance. So by monitoring assets remotely, you can know if a part will fail soon and start thinking about replacing it, order it, and plan the intervention. So you optimize that productivity. And also you can track these parts and also delivery trucks, for instance, along the supply chain and optimize that. So all in all, it brings a lot of efficiency and productivity gains to companies.
So it's a big sort of automation network in a way, and you can follow if you're, again, in logistics, and that might include logistics for, international logistics for not just commercial reasons, but also maybe, people migration or things like that. That's also useful in that respect, I imagine.
Absolutely.
So Arnaud, is there a race, a space race or an IoT race? What is it like in Southeast Asia?
Oh, well, it goes very fast, but maybe if you don't mind, just to complement what just Laurent was saying, I do really agree on the supply chain side. Personally, and at Citain, we work especially on aviation, and we did work on specific projects for supply chain to track air cargo container. And one of the things that we learn in this journey is that the IoT really helps to bring some additional data on top of what the traditional system is bringing. So, and in our case, by putting some specific sensors on the shipment, we're able to really have better accuracy on the container location, but as well some new data about what's happening during transportation, humidity, shock or vibration, whether it would spoil the content or not. And it was really changing, I would say, the way that the transport is done in terms of responsibility and liability shifts. Who and how to can prove who's doing something non-compliant. So yeah, it's really helping on this area. But otherwise, now, to answer to your question, and well, I mean, I would need maybe a few hours to talk about Asia overall. And Asia, by the way, is not a unified block. Different countries having different pace of development in their economy. But clearly and overall, Asia is becoming a digital leader, a technological leader over the last decade. And actually, COVID was accelerating this trend. And one of the things that we see really overall, what means that Asia is really getting a lot of acceleration in this area is the population. So recently, the UN mentioned that we are really increasing the population, but Asia overall is 4.7 billion of people, which represents 60% of the world population, with a medium age of 30 years. So we have young people, super tech savvy overall, of course. And India is even overtaking China very soon. And
really?
Just India alone is, and by next year, 1.4 billion above, apparently, as per UN, 1.4 billion of people. And India and tech is a long story. So they really jump into that in their development. And 3/4 of the world science, tech, engineering, and graduates are coming from India. So we can expect overall, without going into too much detail, that the trend will continue to see Asia overall quite having a strong role in tech and in digital.
Yeah, obviously, when you're sitting in Switzerland, those numbers are a bit mind-boggling and puts things back in perspective a little bit. But Laurent Sauveur, so you have a passion for NFTs and the new technologies as well. So how do you see using NFTs and all of that? Do you think everything needs to be recorded?
Well, maybe before talking about NFTs, maybe on the Internet of Things and more broadly, new technology. Of course, as a leading humanitarian actor, the International Committee of the Red Cross seeks to leverage new technology so it can do better, faster, more effective assistance to the people affected by armed conflict. The foundation for the ICRC, which I'm leading, is actually an innovation lab or hub that looks at what are the ways that we need to invent to do better humanitarian action, to respond to the big challenges that our world is facing, starting with climate change, starting with the fact that wars are being fought now in the cyberspace. And of course, the leveraging of new technologies is absolutely fundamental to the innovation that the ICRC and other humanitarian actors are looking into. So that's to paint the broad picture. Now, when it comes to IoT, I'm not an expert on IoT, and I thank you, 16, to talk about NFTs, but maybe just as a, you know, as a connection with what my fellow panelists have said, humanitarian actors start to use IoTs, especially in the areas of logistics, when it comes to sensors that we put on vaccines, but that also, I mentioned the cyber war and cyber warfare that takes place. This comes with a risk, yeah, because you can imagine that in a given situation, you can manipulate these sensors from afar with disastrous consequences for humanitarian assistance. So we are looking as well at IoT-related applications for humanitarian assistance, even if we at the foundation are maybe a bit more further away from that. You mentioned NFT. Maybe that's for another question, but yes, we are looking how we can more broadly use blockchain-related technology in incorporate it in the work of our teams on the ground. NFTs being one application, but I would say more for the storytelling, and I'm happy to come back to that at a later stage.
Yeah, I think it's also much about people and people ID. I know that WiseKey, which is the company heading Wise.art, the NFT platform that I'm running, they're talking with various governments to even monitor the tourists and like create NFTs on the visas, which would have all the travel documentation, there may be vaccination history, etc., as instead of a visa. And then that would be in the blockchain, and that could be used in any other country as well. It's a huge industry and it's developing. I've got a few figures as well, and we're talking, you know, mind-boggling numbers like half a trillion, I would say, 469 billion, which is being invested in all that. Obviously, if everybody's launching, and maybe Laurent and Arnaud can explain, but if everybody's launching their own satellite out there and being decentralized, and Elon Musk is one of them, and I think Branson too goes into outer space and all that, but there's a lot of worry in the general public about pollution. Like, we've got enough on Earth and now we're polluting space, and all these things are going to fall back to the ground one day. So what's your answer to that? How do you calm people down?
Well, perhaps can I just react on what my fellow panelists just said. Arnaud, you mentioned the increasing population. So we've just reached 8 billion people a few days ago. I'm not very familiar with NFT, but IoT, for instance, has a big role to play in this food supply issue. How do we feed an ever-increasing population, and this agri-tech can greatly benefit from IoT. By having sensors on the ground, you can optimize your crops. You can know when your crops are too dry, but also because it's good to know that your crops are too dry, but if you cannot do anything about it, or you have to send someone to water them, then you lose part of the benefits. So we have some technologies, Stokas has this technology, but other players as well, can enable bidirectionality. So you can retrieve information from the ground, but you can also send commands. You could update a firmware or security patch or something like that, but you can also turn on a valve to irrigate your crops if they need to. So that's a great benefit of IoT for this food supply chain. You talked about the debris in space, so that's another another topic. Yes, it's a growing issue. There's several aspects to it. The European Space Agency, they've issued some guidelines. They say that after the end of a mission, you have 25 years to either deorbit your satellite or put it in a graveyard orbit. But they go a bit further, and actually no later than next week, they will propose at their ministerial council to have a net debris policy on all of their mission starting 2030. So it means all missions going into space after that date, they aim at, well, the number they have right now is that 90% of them could be deorbited if necessary. So that is going, you know, they are trying to lead the path and lead by example. But so far there's no mandatory rules for anyone launching satellites in space to have deorbiting capability. You might know also that in Switzerland we have a great startup called ClearSpace based in Lausanne, and they want to launch a mission in a few years, I think, to go and grab a debris. So it's an active debris removal mission. Go grab the debris and then bring it back to the atmosphere and burn it in the atmosphere. Obviously, there's a high cost to it. So it remains to be seen how sustainable this solution is. But it's another way to tackle this issue.
I also heard that there's some smaller satellites, maybe there's different layers, like some satellites go a lot further into space and some are a lot closer. And there's also some research being done on how to clean the oceans. So from space, you can see where these big islands of plastic, etc., and they can actually also recognize the very, very tiny nanoplastic particles underwater, like in the sea, and you can see that better from the Pico satellites apparently. So there's a company working on that. They were the old it was a boat here called Planète Solar, who was working with Gabriel Donjon, and now that's been bought and it's called Porima, and they're working hard on that, and they've got this artificial intelligence as well telling them where the winds are coming from for the boat, etc. So there's a lot. I mean, we're not talking about casual sailing, but obviously for professional reasons, there's a lot of uses for it, and not just maybe container tracking, but also to help pollution and to solve it more quickly.
For sure. Yes.
So
and there's pollution.
Sorry,
there's also pollution from satellites, but there's also all the rockets launching these satellites. They also contribute to debris in space, but also on the Earth. You're talking about the oceans, but it's funny because 2 weeks ago, there was a threat that a part of a Chinese rocket would fall on Europe, and actually the whole Spain airspace was closed for a few hours, 300 flights delayed, because there was a fear a part of that rocket would fall there, and it fell in the sea eventually close to Mexico. But yeah, there's different aspects to this. Yeah, it starts to be scary, right?
It's we're worried about meteorites, but now we have to worry about our own thing, huh? We're shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit.
Yeah, maybe if I may, 16, because there is so many topics we're addressing, and maybe what Laurent Sauver said about initially about identity, because it echoes some of the projects that we've done at CITA about digital identity, and through there is some variation, some fork of the blockchain called self-sovereign identity, which aim at providing, an immutable, permanent ID with the respect of personal information. And it's pretty hot with GDPR and all these rules in Europe. So with the angle of the passenger, we see that as an opportunity, especially at the time of the COVID, to use this digital identity, blockchain enabled, to make sure we can reestablish trust between governments to make sure that, yes, they can accept a flight with people, travelers, making sure that they were duly vaccinated by a verifiable credential from a verifiable reputable hospital. And beyond that, there is hundreds of millions of people, at least in Asia, certainly in Africa and so on, who cannot prove their identity and therefore cannot have access to any basic services, even prove who they are. So yes, it's a big topic, but maybe a bit beyond the panel, I don't know. But yeah, clearly a very hot topic. And to Laurent, second Laurent, actually, what you say is very true on agriculture, on agri-tech. And I know personally a lot of people in Malaysia, which is just on the north of Singapore, when we have a huge palm tree for palm oil industry, can be maybe a bit controversial, but they start really to use IoT, at least to track the harvest of the people, because you have certain time to do the harvest. And if you don't want to miss, as you say, if you want to wait some specific spots, so there will be certainly a lot of business for you if you come to see us in Asia, Laurent.
I'll interrupt quickly because we already have a question from Anthony. Thank you very much. He would like you to elaborate on how the increasing amount of data that we're dealing with relates with IoT, and especially on questions related to the security of this data input. If more data input is collected on multiple devices, do you envision possibility of data leakage? That's an interesting question. Where is all this data kept?
Yeah, should I take that one? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And furthermore, I think the more objects are connected to the internet, the more doors you have for potential hacking. And for instance, all these wearables, if we go beyond the industrial IoT, but all these wearables we have, these connected watches and so on, I mean, that's a threat to our privacy as well. Someone could track what you're doing, what is your health, and so on. You have connected cars. What if they are hacked? I mean, what if you are driving your Tesla and suddenly someone takes control of it? Can be a real issue. So yes, that provides many doors, many accesses to hackers. I think the solution is, there's multiple solutions. It's encryption. I know Wojski is expert in encryption of data. That's key. Then you have to carefully control access to your data, so software access, but also physical data. Who has access to some critical infrastructure of your system? It's very important. And have a backups of your data, a recovery plan in case of hacking. You can quickly recover your data and put back your service online. I even heard once someone saying that you should keep some crypto money on the side to quickly pay a ransom to hackers. And I don't necessarily agree with that approach, but it's true. It's a threat, and it's difficult to find one solution to it. I mean, as long as, I mean, it's human nature to take advantage of every possible weaknesses on the system, and the solution is multiple.
Yeah.
Laurent, did you want to say something? Laurent, did you want to say something?
Which one?
Le Sauveur, sorry, you.
Well, I think regarding IoT, we have two experts here, so it's not really my area. Like I said, the ICRC is looking at it, but we are looking at broad application of new technologies. But when it comes to the environmental impact of these new technologies, and you mentioned NFT, that has been a big issue for us, especially before what we call in the NFT world and the Ethereum world, the merge, where indeed, because of the mining of Ethereum, there was a significant or quite high environmental impact. But the fact is that with Ethereum moving from proof of work to proof of stake, we actually, they actually, we didn't do anything, managed to reduce the environmental impact by 99.9%, which for us was also a very important factor to be comfortable exploring this aspect, noting that the climate crisis is an important crisis that the ICRC and the broader Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is trying to tackle. And we didn't want to be in opposition with some activity that we were doing.
Yeah, it's all very frightening, but at the same hand, I think it's under control. I'll take this opportunity to excuse Carlos Moreira from the audience. I did it earlier when we were offline, but unfortunately he couldn't join us today, but he was going to tell us about security because, as you know, WISeKey is very, that's their core business. But if you have any questions at all in the audience, just put them down on the Q&A and we can pop them to Carlos separately and we'll get back to you on that. I was mentioning before that there was like a little bit of a race, like we had, back in the 60s, it was the race for space with the rockets, but now it's going on as well with this Internet of Things, and people want to be in there. And it's more a question, not so much about governments fighting in the Cold War between Russia and America, but more so corporations. And, in the private sector, there's just as much money in the private sector going into that than there is with governments. And I think governments are a bit behind, probably behind the private sector in this race. Would you agree with that? Or are you finding it difficult to get authorizations if you need any? Maybe Arnaud in Asia, seeing that you're...
From overall, and again, to some of my experience when I can talk about, as mentioned, about digital identity, there were a competition at that time, mostly at standard level. So some private sector were sending the standards, WHO starting to have their own standards, some consortium of big names, SAP, whatever, starting to do their own. So yeah, sometimes there is a race, but in maybe good emulation, but ideally better if they converge rather than they compete. So we can see that. In Asia, well, it really depends about the topic. The only thing I can say, really talking about Singapore, is that really Singapore government is really organized as a private company. It's amazing. You can really copy paste the governance, bonus, KPI. So there is not much, to my perspective, competition between private and public sector here, and even the public sector is really helping the private by grants, by helping companies, startups to get their office here locally. But once again, each and every Asian country is different. And maybe we'll talk about the climate change, but interestingly, when we talk about climate change, we point out China and of course, and some of the big countries, and certainly. But overall, I found the McKinsey report which just says that Asia is leading the climate transition. I was a bit surprised, but yes, apparently the largest share of renewable energy, 45%, is coming from Asia. So, of course, big number, lot of people, so a lot of impact. But they are really taking seriously at government and private sector the I would say the target to net zero carbon emission and others ESG goals.
Well, we'll see what happens after COP when they come back with the reports of this COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh. Yeah. It'll be news. What do you think, Laurent, in Europe? Is the governance about to hit us hard or not?
Well, I think there's more and more regulation, like for the debris I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. Then there's a race. There's a lot of actors, but we have to distinguish between legacy operators and these new operators brought by the new space approach. By having like more standard components, easier access to space. You have all these new players, entering space, and among them you have the well-known Starlink, you have OneWeb, but these are broadband. Their mission is to connect the world to the internet. All these to bridge this. How do we say, it's a connectivity divide or something? There's a term for that. I forgot about it.
The chasm, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other side you have players like us and others. There's Swarm, actually acquired by SpaceX. There's EcoStar and more players that are really dedicated to IoT and small amounts of data. And then can come up with data plans, because to use the service you have to pay like a subscription fee, like you pay to a mobile operator. Can come up with data plans tailored for IoT and with very small costs for small amounts of data.
Okay.
What legacy operators and these broadband players cannot offer today.
Laurent Le Sauveur, sorry, I have to keep saying the last names. What do you think in your line of work in the humanitarian cause? Is there a big security issue? Is there a big cost issue? Are the regulations going to handicap your progress, or how's that going to work?
No, the security is absolutely essential. I don't know if you followed, but there was a hack. The ICRC was hacked at the beginning of the year of one of its database that contains some sensitive information of missing families. And of course, the protection of our data, given the sensitivity of them, is absolutely essential. And we're trying as much as possible to be top of the class, I would say, and protect this data, noting that they pertain to people who are already affected by a world event and do not want to, in addition, being affected by this sort of cyber attack. So we are looking at that. More generally, I would say that there are sensitive information in the humanitarian sector, but before I was working for the United Nations, that are shared between organizations and all. And we have seen the UN has been attacked in Geneva with cyber attacks, and we see more and more this stepping up to the plate of international organizations to be at the forefront of cyber security.
Mm-hmm. Connectivity, of course, around the entire world is what makes it happen and is what makes it easier and workable. But on the other hand, of course, as you said, leaving open to many gates. So maybe we'll be looking at, well, in Switzerland, we always talk about our nuclear bunkers down, in our cellars. Maybe we'll have to sort of isolate ourselves from connectivity for certain special information or data collection. We had a bit of a joke. I'll tell you, it's an anecdote, but I was on the 3rd level in an underground parking, and a friend of mine left her Tesla keys inside the car. Of course, nothing worked anymore, and we had to ring Tesla in the middle of the night, and they just could not find the car because there was no connectivity. So she had to be towed out. So we all had a good laugh. Maybe that's one way to protect, is to keep away from being connected at will.
Yeah. But this security issue, I believe, Laurent, is even more relevant for humanitarian workers, because they, by definition, they travel the world in remote places. They carry their laptops that they can lose. They connect to some networks that might be insecure. So I can imagine that it's a big topic for you.
The big topic, and if I may, but here maybe taking a step back from the ICRC and giving you, a personal anecdote. Again, I used to work for the United Nations in the human rights field. And when you work for human rights, you have, usually you're on the good side of the fight, and you are trying to protect human rights defenders. But these defenders in some countries are actually persecuted and sometimes risking their death. And you have information about their location, you have information about their whereabouts, their plans, etc. And what you really want to avoid is having a government, hacking your system, and thanks to your data, being able to target the person that you're actually supposed to protect. And this is why it has become much more than just, as you say, Laurent, a security issue, because it's very core to the mission of protecting people who are already vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think a lot of people are sort of concerned with the IoT and this new technology. People think it's commercial as well, and that it's intrusive and all that. I know that Davos next year in January is going to be concentrating on IoT, on the subject as well. So that'll be interesting. And then also how, as we said earlier, how to store the data and whether the ledgers should be again individual, or I don't know how you say it, and decentralized from the cloud or whatever. So how in Davos, how do you think are you guys going, just from curiosity? Are you going to be involved?
Not yet planned, unless you invite us, 16.
We can. Well, Weisky's been going to Davos every year for a long time. But yeah, we're going to be talking about IoT, and also maybe I should say that Weisky has signed up with a company called Fossa down in La Linea in the south of Spain, and they're also sending with SpaceX, actually with Elon Musk, our little Pico satellites, and they're connected mainly for agricultural reasons, but obviously the scope is large and wide. So I don't know, maybe Elon Musk is losing popularity with Twitter, but I think his work on the research is actually very interesting. Would you agree with that? Or is he competition, or is he going too fast, or does he know what he's talking about? Don't really know.
He's certainly inspiring, then a bit controversial, and I don't know. This is recorded and live on YouTube, so I need to be careful.
He'll love it. He'll love the channel, the challenge. May I remind people that we can ask questions? We have one there right now. This is addressed to Laurent. Have you been investigating artificial intelligence to find fraudulent patterns in the human rights field?
No, we didn't to find a fraudulent pattern, but we were looking at artificial intelligence. I mean, different type of applications. For me, it's interesting when we say, Laurent Sauveur or the UN or the ICRC, have you been exploring? At the end of the day, what I saw is that we're a bunch of humanitarian, human rights advocates, etc., but we don't know much about technology. And the whole key, the key about finding applications and the right application is to have a constructive dialogue with the people who maybe do not know anything about our work, humanitarian or human rights, for instance, but who knows all the applications of their own technology, whether it's AI, drone, etc. And I remember I will quote them because they are a partner of my former organization, IBM. We had this workshop between their dev and our human rights officers, who are lawyers, for 2 days trying to identify what they could do. When it comes to AI, one of the applications when I visited the IBM HQ that I was particularly impressed with was the ability to fight disinformation. In other words, on social media, they had built a robot to respond to information that were clearly disinformation based on a scanning of all the information that were available on the internet. And that for me was really, really impressive. And I thought that at the 21st century, it's really something that we could actually use more. Now, one thing with AI and linked with the human rights field, and also with a feedback from my colleagues at IBM. An AI pattern is as good as the data that you're putting in it. So
Laurent, can I just interrupt you 1 second? Your sound is going down. Maybe there's something in front. Yeah.
I guess I'm using the camera micro, so if I don't stand tall, then voila. But just to finish, on AI is as good as the data that it uses. And from a human rights standpoint, if you're using data that are biased, whether it's biased from a gender standpoint or etc., you will get a pattern, future pattern that will be biased. And I think the key for any AI application, or at least this is where I left it, was to how to ensure a clean set of data to actually use at the, let's say, at the best, to the best power, this wonderful tool, which is at the end a tool, yeah, and which will be dependent on the data that we will feed. I'm closing.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's very
especially true.
Yeah.
Yeah, just meant to add maybe just in the windows of airport security, because also is connected. So there is a lot of AI project as well on faces recognition and so on. And it's true that I would say the IoT needs AI to recognize this meaningful pattern, as long as, of course, data is correctly cleaned up. But what is great is really the speed of analysis and the accuracy of analysis. Otherwise, as you say, you would have a nice information, but maybe the pattern and the outcome of that will be found after the event is needed. So the speed of decision, especially from data, multiple bunch of data gathered by IoT, computer vision, and so on, is really important. To have a proper, well-designed AI engine.
Also, I think the tracking of devices, like I come from the art world, and like people really need to know, museums, when you lend out your multi-million-dollar painting to an exhibition or whatever, now they're using these chips, etc., and the connectivity to determine whether there was a huge humidity drop or temperature drop, or displacement is one thing, but also a shock, like a rapid displacement if somebody dropped it. All that can be gathered now, and of course it's important for insurances, it's important for even the restoration if it's required afterwards. So, and it's the same, I believe, with wine growers. I mean, they're starting to put chips on their bottles, when these travel, or if they've been tampered with on the cork and whatever, all that can be traced back now and then recorded. And especially in the art world, or any industry where history is important, you're starting to do a record. I mean, for me, as far as art is concerned, this new ledger, which will be all this data collection, is like the new catalogue raisonné for an artwork. But again, like for an artwork that is already an old master's, if the information is wrong to begin with, well, that doesn't help very much. So, I mean, the authenticity of it is still relative. But if we start from today, I'm sure in 150 years' time, it will be super useful. And common ground, really. Would you say that? Would you say that in like, I don't know in how many years, but let's say in 50 years, everybody will be connected and it will be second nature?
I think with the mobile phone, we're already over-connected.
Yeah, that's true.
But
it can
what
be
you said, yeah, and it depends on the purpose. Just as you said, proof of authenticity is absolutely key, and some of the implied benefit, is as well the fight against fraud or fake, and we see that especially in the pharma industry. In percentage of the world, you have 5 or more %, but I don't remember exactly, of drugs who are fake. And you don't want that. No one wants that. So yeah, so that's as well one of the answers. You can track at shipment level, box level, factory to raw material level, that yes, this stuff is really well manufactured. So it works to be well connected. In some other case, it's good to disconnect.
Now, I have a question which came to me outside of this webinar, but I thought was pretty interesting. People like yourselves who are developing and who've got entities, they're actually lacking staff to recruit because there's not that many people who are trained in this sort of thing. Would you agree with that? Do you think that at university level there should be more emphasis on these new technologies and the the application of IoT or AI or whatever it is, blockchain? Or do you think that every second millennial is already trained?
Well, the word I was looking for before is the digital divide. And I just looked for the number because I wasn't sure, but there's 3 billion people that have no access to the internet today. So although we are 8 billion, there's a third of the population still having no access to the internet and all the opportunities that this offers, to build a business, to learn. So there's a lot of potential to have more people connected, for sure, and more people trained on these new technologies. And the massive open online courses, these MOOCs, so-called MOOCs, are going in that direction. All these universities offering free courses on the internet, and that's great for people having no universities or opportunities to learn otherwise.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, was when the laptops came out. I think it was Bill Gates that was distributing laptops for $1 in Africa or something. So, but then again, if there's no connectivity, I mean, it doesn't really help to have a laptop other than a word processor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're sort of...
Yeah, 16, if I may just say, because you talk about the talent pool, digital talent availability. So I don't know the Swiss market, Singapore market is very, very small. I was mentioning earlier that yes, you have a bunch of university, talking about, of course, India, China, who are really, I would say, a lot of university. It's more government, absolute guideline to develop those talents. And that's maybe why as well they are maybe so strong in innovation. So for me, yes, it's a very vital. And my personal entrepreneur experience, it's a war of talent, because the one who are really skilled can get their salary, I don't want to say double, but almost double, with some big names, some big corporates. So you have to fight if you're a smaller company by giving some other type of benefit, flexible work arrangement, and so on. So yeah, the tech talent pool, the digital talent pool is really, really important for future innovation and business growth.
So you'd advise every bachelor now or high school student to go in that direction, well, and then to call you.
I see my kids, unfortunately, can already use iPad and so on when they were 8 years old. I mean, you need to work and you need to have a certain acumen on technology, of course, hard work. But I don't imagine that a society should have all their capabilities, all their talent toward technology. But clearly, it's really important for the topic we have just talked about, IoT and so on.
Yeah. And is that a problem for you, for the ICRC or any other ONG, you think, to recruit people who are savvy at the moment, or do they all want to be out there on the terrain?
No, I mean, it is an issue. I mean, the management of manpower, I mean, there are many issues, the talent to go to the field, and especially when you have a surge like with the Ukraine situation or any type of emergency. So you need to increase immediately almost your manpower by 10, 20, 30. So that's a big challenge. But when it comes to very specific fields, cybersecurity, I mean, these are these are capabilities that we are and competencies that we are seeing are being requested now by INGOs or international organizations, and that was not the case, before. And when I started my career, we were talking about partnership with companies. That was a long time ago. That was new. Now it's the bread and butter of many NGOs. So I think, yes, the not-for-profit sector, humanitarian sector, is actually adapting. We are not equipped from a salary standpoint to beat the big names. And what we can offer is a different type of reward, more personal. But clearly, getting the right talent to address these particular issues and challenges, which are, as I mentioned, issues that humanitarian actors are looking at, it's key for us.
Yeah. In your case, you have to add empathy on the CV, on the job description.
You need that, like in many companies as well. It's not only CRC who has the monopoly of empathy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We're almost towards the end of our webinar. I hope you people enjoyed it out there. We didn't get many questions, but maybe we'll get them later, and I'll forward them to all of our speakers at the time. This is going to be the last webinar of this season. Tomorrow, we've got a big event going on in Seville in Spain. So if people are interested in acquiring or collecting NFTs from artists from Spain over the net, it's all going to be online tomorrow afternoon at 3. And then we will be in Davos, and I will let, of course, Mr. Moreira know that you're all interested in joining us over there. And then we've got another event. We do a lot of fundraising, actually. And so this is why Laurent and I are often in discussion. But we've got an event on the 10th of December with a company called ONU Art. And they sort of talk about issues for the UN through the channel of art. And so they're and culture. So they're selling an NFT with an operatic singer called Jonas Kaufmann. And coming on to that, we're also working, for example, with the WHO, because a lot of the ONGs or people who are looking to raise funds now use art as a vector to give the message. There's also, I know at COP, there was a lot of art. There's also in Saudi Arabia, they're using art now in their smart cities to sort of raise awareness. So it's a new type of channel to communicate to people. And of course, IoT, when there's art traveling, IoT has to be present, at least from now on. So perhaps with that being said, I'll close with a final word from all three of you. I'll start with Laurent VDM.
No special final word. Thank you very much for inviting me. I was very pleased to exchange with Arnaud and Laurent and U16. So hopefully we'll meet for real soon, maybe in Davos.
Yeah, I'll
again.
keep that in mind. And yeah, the WiseKey offices in Geneva are always open to everybody. And if not, we'll see you in Davos. Laurent, any final words, any fundraising operations going on now?
Well, fundraising always, especially ahead of Christmas, but just to say that this conversation for me has highlighted again how we humanitarian actors can benefit from an exchange with people who are on top of their field. And I do believe that if we manage to find the time and if we are aligned with the shared objective, there's a lot of new applications that can come out of this very rich discussion. And like Laurent, I'm thanking you, especially you in Singapore, staying that late for this rich exchange.
Thank you. Arnaud?
Yeah, but thanks for inviting me today, and really happy to participate, hopefully contribute with the experience that I have on this field. But just we talked about IoT, AI, blockchain, but my just takeaway is that it's not one technology against or to supersede one of the others. We're really more talking and developing solutions where those technologies converge or are combined develop a maximum of value. But it depends about the use case. But yes, technology. I mean, that's a great area to be in. Yes, I encourage a new generation to be in this field.
That's thank you very much. I do have to finish with one last question from Benedict Hadley, who's asking all of you, how do you see the IoT in the apparel sector? Maybe, Benedict, would you like to, what's the apparel sector? I'm not sure if he's going to be answering now.
It's all the clothing.
Okay,
clothing,
fashion industry.
I think. Oh, I have zero idea on this one, I'm sorry.
Any thoughts on that? Well, you know, with Laurent, as you're often shipping not just apparel, but you know, a lot of vital materials, no?
Yeah, the only things I can say on the retail, it exists already. You have a lot of RFID chips, which are easily embedded into the clothes, you know, for counting, for inventory management. But as well, again, that was the area. I know there will be some futuristic combination with a lot of tech embedded, but to me, well, I'm not competent enough to have a precise opinion there.
Maybe there would be a way to also check the provenance and if it's socially acceptable the way it's built, you know, like the sustainable and all that, whether it's ethical is the word I'm looking for. Perhaps with the IoT,
but with the price of the tag, I doubt maybe it will be directly on the clothes. It may be at the end maybe a QR code or whatever type of code, which can reflect the origin. But I don't see. At the end, there is an economic equation. You put a sensor as an IoT device when it can make sense for the business case. But I'm sure Laurent knows that better than me. But for clothes, wow, we need to have really specific, maybe for Laurent Pasquier kind of people. I don't know.
For the next Hermès bag.
Ouais, voilà. Yes, they did, on the baggage, actually, there is an experiment with Sigfox, if I'm not mistaken, and they put some tags, some NFC or RFID tag into baggage for advanced traceability. But yeah, there is certainly other use case in final product, otherwise more at batch, at container.
Yeah, it should be more perhaps for the luxury industry as well. In this case, the watch industry too, probably. All right. Well, again, thank you very much. I'll cut it off now. I wish you all a very good evening. Wish you a good night, Arnaud. And also happy festive season, which is coming up next month. We'll be in Miami too at the beginning of December. So if any of you are in Miami for the Art Week, I'm happy to have a coffee with you there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.